Okay, so picture this. You stumble upon a warehouse, right? It's packed with pallets, just piled high, with everything you can think of.
Everything.
From like brand name clothes to like the latest gadgets,
Yeah.
all at a fraction of retail price.
Oh,
Sounds kind of like something Indiana Jones would find.
right.
But instead of relics, it's liquidation pallets.
Okay.
And today we're diving into how you can actually build a brand using them.
It's a fascinating corner of the retail world, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And you're right, there's that element of discovery, and let's be honest, a bit of a gamble.
Yeah.
But if you approach it strategically, it's more than just like flipping someone's unwanted stuff. It can be the foundation of a legitimate business.
Totally. So before we get to the like building a brand part, can we just like back up for a sec?
Sure.
We've tossed around liquidation pallets a couple of times.
Yeah.
What exactly are we talking about here? Like, why should anyone even care?
Imagine this. A store ends up with like extra inventory, right? For whatever reason, maybe it's seasonal items, customer returns, or just stuff that didn't sell.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of messing around with selling it piecemeal, they bundle it onto these pallets and sell them off at a steep discount to folks like our listeners who are savvy enough to see the potential.
So it's like supersized thrifting,
Yeah.
but with the goal of reselling.
Yeah.
But we're not just talking about like weekend yard sales here, are we?
Oh, no, no.
You mentioned building a brand. That implies something much bigger, right?
Absolutely. We're talking about a legitimate reselling business.
Okay.
That means thinking about things like consistent inventory, maybe even registering for a tax ID, not just making a quick buck on the weekend.
Right.
And that's where the real opportunities lie, because when you're getting inventory at such low prices, the profit margins can be amazing.
Okay. I'm seeing the appeal here,
Yeah.
especially for someone who's like entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
But I'm also the type who needs to like see the goods before I buy,
Yeah.
you know. What kind of stuff can you actually find on these liquidation pallets?
Yeah.
Is it all just like rejects?
That's a common misconception. You'll find a huge range of products, and the quality can vary, which is something we'll dig into later. But to answer your question, think electronics, smartphones, laptops, those cool Bluetooth speakers everyone wants.
Okay.
Then there's clothing, everything from basic tees to designer labels, seasonal wear, the whole shebang.
Okay. I'm already picturing a pallet full of those designer winter coats we talked about earlier.
Right.
See, this is why we do this show.
There you go.
But let's not forget about like the homebodies.
Okay.
What about those of us who'd rather stay in and, I don't know, redecorate?
You're speaking my language.
Okay.
You got your home goods, appliances, furniture, quirky decor, you name it. And let's not forget fitness gear, outdoor equipment, toys, basically. If you can buy it in a store, it probably exists on a liquidation pallet somewhere.
It's like having access to the entire retail ecosystem, but at a fraction of the cost.
Yep.
So where does someone even begin to tap into this hidden market? Is it like a secret society? A handshake deal at the back of a truck stop?
Well, it's not quite that secretive. There are actually established companies that specialize in connecting resellers with these liquidation pallets. One such company is the Bin Store, and they've actually built quite a reputation for themselves in this space, but we'll get to that later.
Okay, no spoilers.
Yeah.
But it sounds like finding the right source is key here.
Yeah.
Speaking of keys, I'm picturing warehouses full of these pallets.
Yeah.
How do you even know what you're getting?
That's where the strategic part comes in and where a lot of newcomers get tripped up. You can't just blindly buy a pallet based on a vague description. You have to be willing to put in the work and do your due diligence.
Okay, so before we dive into the nitty-gritty of how to actually make this work, let's take a step back and acknowledge the elephant in the room. This all sounds amazing. Huge profit potential, a chance to build a brand, but like, let's be real. Buying a pallet full of who knows what sight unseen, there's got to be a catch, right? I mean, what about those horror stories you see online, pallets full of broken junk things that just don't sell?
Okay, you've clearly done your research, which is a good sign. And you're right, not every pallet is a gold mine.
Right.
That's why due diligence is crucial and why we're spending time on this before you even think about bidding on your first lot.
So walk us through it. Let's say our listener, let's call her Sarah. She's ready to take the plunge. She's got her brand idea, a website ready to go, and she's found a pallet of, I don't know, vintage board games. It's calling her name. What should she do?
First things first, Sarah needs to pump the brakes on that purchase impulse. Even if a pallet seems perfect for your brand, you absolutely have to inspect it if at all possible. Now, not every seller allows in-person inspections, and that's where knowing your source comes in, but we'll circle back to that.
Okay, so assuming Sarah can't inspect in person, what's like the next best thing?
Detailed photos and documentation are key.
Okay.
If the seller's being vague or only showing a few glamour shots, That's a red flag.
Yeah.
You want to see close-ups, ideally with any damage or defects clearly visible. And don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
A reputable seller will be upfront about the condition of their pallets.
Okay, so let's say Sarah finds a seller who checks out, gets her hands on that pallet of vintage games. What's next? Time to list them all online and watch the money roll in.
Not quite so fast.
Oh,
Remember, we're talking about building a brand, not just reselling.
okay.
This is where that strategic thinking comes in. It's not just about what you sell, but how you sell it.
Okay, so what does that mean in practice? What's the difference between, say, just throwing those board games up on an online marketplace versus actually crafting a brand around them?
It's all about creating an experience for your customer.
Okay.
Think about your brand identity. What kind of vibe are you going for? What kind of customer are you trying to attract? Then tailor your listings, your photos, even your packaging to reflect that.
So even though Sarah got these games at a steal, she needs to treat them like they're premium products. Isn't that a bit counterintuitive?
It might seem that way, but trust me, it makes a world of difference. Remember, you're competing with countless other sellers, many of whom are also sourcing from liquidation pallets. What sets you apart is the story you tell, the experience you create.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's not just about finding a bargain. It's about finding the right bargain that fits your brand and then elevating it.
Exactly. Now, speaking of finding the right bargain, let's circle back to sourcing those pallets. You mentioned the bin store earlier.
Right. They piques my interest.
Mhm.
Are they the only game in town? Or are there other ways to tap into this like liquidation gold mine? Are they the only game in town, or are there other ways to tap into this like liquidation gold mine?
They're definitely a big player, and for good reason, but they're not the only option.
Okay.
You've got online marketplaces that specialize in liquidation pallets direct from retailer auctions, even local auctions. Each has its own pros and cons.
Okay, so let's break that down for Sarah, our vintage board game enthusiast. What are the like trade-offs she needs to consider?
Let's start with places like the bin store. Their biggest advantage is curation and often quality control. They've built a reputation, so they're picky about the pallets they sell.
Yeah, that makes sense.
This is huge for someone new, as it minimizes the risk of getting stuck with a dud. Plus, they often provide more detailed information and photos.
Okay, so less the mystery box element, more transparency.
Yeah.
What about the downsides?
The trade-off is usually price.
Right.
You're paying for that convenience and peace of mind.
Yeah.
Then you've got online marketplaces. Think of it like eBay, but for pallets.
Okay, yeah.
More variety, potentially lower prices, but also more risk.
Yeah.
You're dealing with a wider range of sellers, so doing your due diligence is even more important.
Reading those seller reviews religiously, checking for red flags, that sort of thing. And what about going directly to the source, those retailer auctions?
Now, that's where the real pros often play. Huge volumes, rock-bottom prices, but it's not for the faint of heart. You need to really know your stuff, be able to assess inventory quickly, and usually you're buying sight unseen. Plus, there's often a minimum purchase amount that can be daunting for someone just starting out.
So it's like leveling up in a video game.
Exactly.
Start with something like the bin store to get your feet wet, then maybe graduate to those higher stakes options as you gain experience.
Exactly. And remember, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. You might find that a mix of sourcing methods works best for your business.
This has been eye-opening. So to wrap things up for Sarah and all our listeners who are now eyeing every cardboard box with suspicion, what's like the one piece of advice you'd leave them with?
Don't be afraid to dive in, but do your homework. Knowledge is power in this game. The more you understand about the products you're selling your target market and the ins and outs of sourcing, the better equipped you'll be to navigate the exciting, sometimes messy, but ultimately rewarding world of reselling.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll be featuring your brand as a success story on The Deep Dive. Until then, happy treasure hunting, everyone.